Jack Murphy had never been to an alien funeral before. He stood in the Great Hall of Harmony Prime Station, surrounded by creatures he had only seen in training videos. Some had scales that shimmered under the lights. Others had fur or skin that changed colors. A few floated in the air without touching the ground. Jack tried not to stare, but it was hard. Everything was so different from home. The hall was massive, with walls that seemed to be made of living crystal. They pulsed with soft light, changing from blue to purple to green. The air smelled strange, like flowers he had never encountered mixed with something metallic. Hundreds of beings filled the space, all dressed in various forms of mourning clothes. Some wore black like humans did. Others wore bright colors or nothing at all except painted symbols on their bodies. Jack tugged at his dress uniform collar. It felt too tight. He was 26 years old and had been in the diplomatic service for only 2 years. This assignment was way above his level, but his supervisor had insisted. Someone from Earth needed to attend, and everyone else was busy with more important meetings. The funeral was for Commander Velcora, a war hero from the Xanthari species. Jack knew the basic facts from his briefing file. Velcora had commanded a fleet that protected Earth's colony ships 3 years ago during something called the Breach Crisis. Without him, millions of humans would have died when their ships were attacked by raiders. Earth owed him a debt. That was why someone needed to be here. Jack moved slowly through the crowd, trying to find a good spot to stand. He received strange looks from some of the aliens. A few nodded at him with what he hoped was respect. Others simply ignored him. He was used to being the odd one out. Humans were still new to the galactic community, and many species did not know what to make of them yet. Near the front of the hall stood a raised platform made of black stone. On it sat a large container that glowed from within. Jack assumed it held the commander's remains, though he was not sure how Xanthari handled their dead. His briefing had not covered that detail. Then he saw her. She stood alone on the left side of the platform, separate from the other mourners. She was Xanthari, that much was obvious. She had the same basic shape as a human woman, but taller, maybe 6.5 feet. Her skin was a deep purple color, smooth and flawless. 4 arms extended from her torso, each one graceful and long. Her face was more angular than a human's, with high cheekbones and a straight nose. But her eyes were the most striking feature. They were large and completely black like pools of ink, but somehow Jack could see emotion in them even from a distance. She wore a long dress made of silver material that moved like water. It covered her from neck to floor with openings for all 4 arms. Across the fabric, tiny lights blinked on and off in slow patterns. Jack remembered from his training that Xanthari could control bioluminescent patterns in their skin and clothing. The slow, dim pulsing meant grief. This had to be Lyra, the widow. Jack knew he should look away. Staring was rude in almost every culture, but something about her held his attention. Maybe it was the way she stood so still while everyone else moved around her. Maybe it was the overwhelming sadness that seemed to radiate from her like heat. Or maybe it was something else, something he could not name. She turned her head suddenly, and her black eyes locked onto his. Jack's heart jumped. He had been caught staring like a child. Heat rushed to his face. He started to look down to apologize with his body language, but then something unexpected happened. Her mouth curved upward at the corners. She was smiling. The bioluminescent patterns on her dress brightened just a little, shifting from dim blue to a warmer purple. Among the Xanthari, Jack remembered, that meant a change from deep sorrow to something gentler. Recognition, maybe, or acceptance. Before Jack could process what was happening, Lyra began walking toward him. The crowd seemed to sense her movement and parted without being asked. Aliens stepped aside, creating a clear path between them. Jack's military training told him to stand straight, shoulders back, hands at his sides. He did not know what else to do. Lyra moved with incredible grace. Her feet barely seemed to touch the floor. The silver dress flowed around her legs like liquid metal. She was taller than Jack by several inches, and as she approached, he had to tilt his head up slightly to maintain eye contact. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could smell her scent. It was pleasant, like rain on stone with a hint of something sweet. Her forearms hung at her sides, 2 slightly forward and 2 slightly back. Jack noticed her hands had 6 fingers each, long and delicate. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the crowd faded into background hum. Jack could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. What was he supposed to say? What was the proper greeting for a widow at her husband's funeral? Then Lyra leaned forward, bringing her face close to his. Her breath was warm against his ear. When she spoke, her voice was soft and musical, with an accent he could not place. "Don't be afraid, human. You remind me of him. That same curiosity in your eyes." Jack opened his mouth to respond, but before he could form words, Lyra moved again. One of her lower arms reached out and her 6-fingered hand grasped his. She pressed something small and hard into his palm, then closed his fingers around it. "Keep this safe," she whispered. "Trust no one else." Then she was gone, gliding back through the crowd toward the platform. The other mourners closed the path behind her, and within seconds Jack could barely see her silver dress among the mass of bodies. He looked down at his closed fist. Slowly he opened his fingers. In his palm sat a small crystal no bigger than his thumbnail. It was clear but seemed to have swirls of color inside it like captured smoke. The crystal was warm, almost hot, as if it had been sitting in the sun. Jack's mind raced with questions. What was this? Why had she given it to him? What did she mean about trust? And what did he remind her of? He looked back toward the platform, trying to spot Lyra again, but she had disappeared completely. The ceremony was beginning. A tall alien with golden skin stepped forward and began speaking in a language Jack did not understand. The translation device in his ear converted the words into English with a slight delay. The speaker talked about Commander Velcora's bravery, his dedication to peace, his sacrifice for others. Standard funeral talk, Jack thought. But something felt off. The other aliens in the crowd seemed uncomfortable. Some whispered to each other. A few kept glancing around as if watching for something. Jack slipped the crystal into his uniform pocket, making sure it was secure. His hand trembled slightly. Whatever Lyra had given him, it was important. Important enough that she had broken her people's mourning customs to approach him. Important enough that she had told him to trust no one. The ceremony continued for another hour. Jack stood at attention the whole time, his mind only half on the speeches and rituals. The crystal felt heavy in his pocket, like it weighed much more than it should. When the final blessing was given and the crowd began to disperse, Jack took one last look around for Lyra. She was nowhere to be seen. Jack made his way back to the docking area where the diplomatic shuttle waited. His escort, a security officer named Greg Hayes, nodded as he approached. "How was it?" Greg asked. "Different," Jack said. He did not mention the crystal or the widow. Something told him to keep quiet, at least for now. On the shuttle ride back to the human embassy ship, Jack sat in silence. He stared out the window at the stars and thought about black eyes and silver dresses and a voice that whispered, "Don't be afraid." But Jack was afraid. Not of Lyra, but of what she had given him and what it might mean. In his pocket, the crystal seemed to pulse with warmth like a second heartbeat. Jack sat at his desk for 3 hours, just staring at the crystal. His quarters on the embassy ship were small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a bathroom, and a window showing the black of space. Everything a junior officer needed and nothing more. The crystal rested on his desk under the light. It had stopped feeling warm after he took it from his pocket. Now it was just cool and smooth like any other piece of glass. But Jack knew it was more than that. Lyra had risked everything to give it to him. Centauri widows were supposed to speak to no one for a full year after their mate died. Breaking that custom could bring shame to her entire family. He picked up the crystal and held it up to the light. The colors inside swirled and shifted, blues and purples and sometimes a flash of gold. It was beautiful. But Jack had no idea what it was for. His computer terminal sat on the corner of his desk. Jack had been avoiding it, but he knew what he had to do. He needed to see what was on this thing. But if it was some kind of data storage, he had to be careful. The wrong person finding out about it could be dangerous. Lyra's words echoed in his mind. "Trust no one else." Jack stood and walked to his door. He pressed the lock button, then checked it twice to make sure it was secure. He went to his window and closed the privacy screen. Then he returned to his desk and powered up his terminal. The embassy ship used standard human technology, compatible with most alien systems thanks to years of treaty negotiations. Jack opened the data port on his terminal and looked at the crystal. There was no obvious way to connect it, no plugs or ports. He held the crystal close to the data port. Nothing happened. He tried touching it to various parts of the terminal. Still nothing. Maybe it was not a data device at all. Maybe it was just a gift, something symbolic. Then Jack noticed something. When he held the crystal near the terminal scanner, The swirls inside started moving faster. The colors brightened. He held it directly over the scanner, and the terminal screen flickered. Text appeared on his screen. Xanthari symbols that his computer slowly translated into English. Biolock detected. Place hand on scanner for verification. Jack's hand shook as he placed his palm on the scanner. The device read his fingerprints, his DNA, everything that made him uniquely Jack Murphy. A loading bar appeared on screen. It filled slowly, taking almost a minute. Then the screen went black. For a moment, Jack thought he had broken something. But then a face appeared. It was a Xanthari male, older than Lyra, with darker purple skin and scars across his neck. His bioluminescent patterns pulsed with urgency. "If you are watching this, I am dead." The voice was deep and clear, speaking English with barely any accent. "My name is Commander Velcora. My wife was instructed to give this data crystal to someone she felt could be trusted, someone outside the normal chains of command, someone who would not be compromised." Jack leaned closer to the screen. This was recorded before the commander died. How had he known? Velcora continued. 3 months ago, I discovered evidence of a conspiracy within the Galactic Council. Several high-ranking members from different species have been working together to undermine humanity's integration into galactic society. They see your people as a threat. The commander's image shifted. He was now sitting at a desk, documents spread around him. The breach crisis 3 years ago was not a random attack by raiders. It was planned, orchestrated. The goal was to destroy Earth's colony program and force your species to remain dependent on the established powers. Jack felt his blood turn cold. The breach crisis had nearly wiped out humanity's expansion into space. Over 5,000 people had died when 6 colony ships were attacked. Earth had always assumed it was just bad luck, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But if Velcora was right, it was murder on a massive scale. The video continued. "I have gathered evidence. Communications between the conspirators, financial records showing money transfers, testimony from individuals who helped carry out the attacks. All of it is included in this data crystal." Velcora's expression became grim. "I tried to expose this through official channels. I went to my superiors, to the Council's Investigation Bureau, even to the High Court. Every time my evidence was buried or dismissed. These conspirators have people everywhere. They are too powerful to challenge directly." He paused and his bioluminescent patterns dimmed with sadness. "By the time you watch this, they will have silenced me. I know too much and I refuse to stop digging. My ship is scheduled for a training mission next week. I believe they will make it look like an accident. Equipment failure or pilot error." Jack realized he was holding his breath. He let it out slowly. "I am recording this as insurance," Velcora said. "My wife knows what to do. She will find someone brave enough to continue the work, someone who cares more about truth than politics. I spent 5 years studying humanity, and I believe your species has something rare, the ability to hope when all seems lost, the refusal to give up even when the odds are impossible." The commander stood up. Behind him, Jack could see a window showing stars. "The data crystal contains everything you need. Names, locations, evidence. But be warned, these people are dangerous. They have killed before and will kill again. If you choose to pursue this, you will be putting yourself at risk." Velcora's face filled the screen again. His black eyes seemed to look directly at Jack. "I do not know who you are, human, but my wife chose you and I trust her judgment completely. The question now is whether you will trust mine. Will you fight for justice even when it means going against the most powerful beings in the galaxy?" The video ended. The screen went back to showing files and folders. Hundreds of them. Jack clicked on one at random. It opened to show a communication log between 2 council members discussing the timeline for the colony ship attacks. Another file contained financial records, showing massive payments to mercenary groups. A third file had video testimony from a human engineer named Pete Collins, confessing his role in sabotaging ship systems. Jack spent the next 4 hours going through the files. The more he read, the sicker he felt. The conspiracy was huge, involving at least a dozen species and reaching the highest levels of galactic government. They had not just attacked the colony ships. They had also been working to block human trade deals, sabotage diplomatic relationships, and spread rumors about humanity being dangerous and untrustworthy. And they had killed Velcora to keep it all secret. Jack leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. They burned from staring at the screen. Outside his window, stars moved slowly past as the ship orbited Harmony Prime Station. Everything looked peaceful and orderly, but underneath there was rot. He thought about Lyra. She had lost her husband to these people. She could have hidden away in grief, following her people's customs and staying silent. Instead, she had taken a huge risk by approaching Jack at the funeral. She had trusted him with the truth, with her husband's final mission. But what could Jack do? He was nobody important, just a junior diplomatic officer with no connections and no power. If he went to his superiors with this evidence, it would probably disappear, just like it had when Velcora tried. The conspirators had people everywhere. Jack stood and paced his small quarters. 5 steps to the wall, turn around, 5 steps back. He had a choice to make. He could delete the files, destroy the crystal, and pretend none of this had happened. Go back to his normal job, filing reports and attending boring meetings. Stay safe, or he could do what Velcora believed humans could do. He could hope. He could fight. Jack stopped pacing. He knew what he had to do. It was crazy and probably suicidal, but it was right. He could not let thousands of deaths go unanswered. He could not let powerful people get away with murder just because they had good connections. But first, he needed to find Lyra. She was the only other person who knew the full truth. The only one he could trust. Together, maybe they could figure out a plan. Jack sat back at his terminal and started searching the station's records for Lyra's location. The embassy ship had access to Harmony Prime's registration system. He found her name quickly. She had checked into a hotel on the station's commercial level for 3 days, the traditional mourning period for Zenthari who were away from home. Jack checked the time. It was late, almost midnight by ship time. But this could not wait. He copied all the files from the crystal onto an encrypted data stick, then hid the original crystal in a vent in his quarters. If someone came looking, he did not want to have everything in one place. He changed out of his uniform into civilian clothes. Just a simple shirt and pants. He grabbed his data stick and his identification papers. Then he unlocked his door and stepped into the corridor. The ship was quiet at this hour. Most people were sleeping. Jack made his way to the docking area where shuttles connected to the station. A board security guard sat at the checkpoint. Working late? The guard asked. Could not sleep, Jack said. Thought I would get a drink on the station. Clear my head. The guard waved him through without much interest. Jack boarded a shuttle and took a seat. 3 other people were on board, all looking tired. The shuttle detached from the embassy ship and flew across the short distance to Harmony Prime. The station was livelier than the ship. Even at midnight, aliens moved through the corridors. Shops were open, selling food and goods from 100 worlds. Music played from somewhere, a strange me. Lyra led Jack to her room on the 8th floor. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a space much larger than his quarters on the embassy ship. The walls were decorated with flowing designs that reminded Jack of water. A large window showed the curved surface of the planet below, covered in clouds and oceans. Lyra gestured for Jack to sit on a low couch. She remained standing, all 4 arms crossed in front of her body. Her bioluminescent patterns had changed to a pale blue color that pulsed slowly. Jack remembered from his training that this meant caution. "How much did you read?" Lyra asked. Her voice was calm, but Jack could hear the tension underneath. "Most of it. Maybe half. There are hundreds of files." Lyra nodded. "My husband spent 8 months gathering that evidence. He barely slept. He knew what would happen if he was discovered, but he kept going anyway." Jack leaned forward. "Why did you give it to me? You don't know anything about me." "That is not true." Lyra walked to the window and looked out at the planet. "My husband studied humans for years. It was his special interest. He believed your species would change the galaxy, for better or worse. He kept files on thousands of humans, politicians, scientists, soldiers, diplomats, anyone who might be important." She turned back to face Jack. "Your file was in his personal collection. He flagged it with a special marker. When he gave me instructions about what to do if something happened to him, he included specific names, humans he thought could be trusted, humans who might be brave enough to act." "I'm nobody," Jack said. "Just a low-level diplomat. Why would he think I could do anything?" Lyra's patterns brightened slightly. "You want to know what your file said?" Jack nodded. "It said you lost your parents when you were 7 years old. The transport ship Bright Hope. It was one of the early colony attempts before the big push. The ship had engine problems and exploded. 70 people died. Jack felt the old pain stir in his chest. He had not thought about that day in months. Everyone knows that story if they look up my records. Yes, but here is what interested my husband. You were raised by military families after that. You could have blamed aliens for your parents' deaths. The ship was built with Xanthari engines, after all. But you did not. When you were old enough to choose your own path, you joined the diplomatic corps. You wanted to build bridges between species, not walls. Lyra sat down across from Jack. Her black eyes studied his face. My husband believed that said something about your character. He wrote in your file that you were someone who chose understanding over anger, hope over bitterness. Those are rare qualities, human. My name is Jack. Jack. Lyra said it carefully, like she was tasting the word. I am Lyra, though you already know that. I'm sorry about your husband. Lyra's patterns dimmed. Thank you. He was a good man. He believed the galaxy could be better than it was. That species could work together instead of fighting for power. The conspirators killed him because of that belief. Jack pulled out his data stick. I copied the files. I've been thinking about what to do. Going through official channels won't work. Your husband already tried that. Correct. The conspiracy reaches too far. Any investigation would be blocked. What about the media? If we leak the files to news networks, get the information out to the public? Lyra shook her head. The major networks are controlled by the same powers that sit on the council. They would suppress the story or call it fake. Without an official investigation to back it up, the evidence could be dismissed as conspiracy theory. Jack stood and started pacing. The room was bigger than his quarters, so at least he had more space to walk. There has to be a way. We can't just let them get away with this. My husband spent months trying to find a way, Lyra said quietly. He was smarter than both of us combined, and he could not find a solution. That is why he died. He knew he was trapped, so he made sure the evidence would survive him. Then what was the point? Jack's frustration came out louder than he intended. Why give me the files if nothing can be done? Lyra stood and all four of her arms spread wide in a gesture Jack did not recognize. Because you are human. My husband believed humans had something the rest of us lack. A refusal to accept defeat. An ability to find solutions where others see only walls. That's just romantic nonsense. Humans aren't magical. No, but you are different. Every species in the galaxy has a story about how they almost went extinct. Plague or war or natural disaster. For most of us, that story ends with us barely surviving and learning to be cautious. But humans? You nearly destroyed yourselves a dozen times. Climate collapse, nuclear war, disease, asteroid impacts. Each time, you were down to a few million survivors. Each time, you somehow clawed your way back. Lyra's patterns brightened with intensity. Do you know what the rest of the galaxy calls you? The species that refuses to die? The ones who look at impossible odds and say, not today. That is what my husband saw in you. Not magic, but stubbornness. Hope that borders on insanity. Jack stopped pacing. He had heard those stories before, usually told with either admiration or fear. Earth's history was brutal, full of near extinctions and desperate survivals. Maybe Lyra was right. Maybe humans were just too stubborn to accept that something was impossible. Okay, Jack said. Let's say I'm stubborn enough to try. What's the plan? Because I'm fresh out of ideas. Lyra sat back down. I have been thinking about this since my husband died. There is one place the conspirators cannot control. One forum where truth becomes permanent record, no matter who tries to suppress it. The Grand Assembly. Yes. Every 3 months, all council members gather for an open session. Anyone with standing can present testimony. It is broadcast live across every major system, and the records are locked into permanent archives. Once something is said there, it cannot be erased. Jack saw where this was going. But you need special permission to speak at the assembly, and security would stop anyone trying to present damaging evidence. unless the speaker has protected status. There are certain rights that cannot be denied, even by the conspirators. One of those is the right of the fallen. A widow of a military hero may address the assembly to honor her husband's memory. Jack's mind raced. You could request to speak and they would have to allow it. Any attempt to block you would raise questions. Exactly. And once I have the platform, I can present everything. The communications, the financial records, the testimony. All of it becomes part of the official record. They'll arrest you the moment you finish. Lyra's patterns pulsed with determination. Perhaps. But the truth will be out. That is what matters. Jack shook his head. No. There has to be a better way. One that doesn't end with you in prison or worse. I am Zenthari. We believe in completing our duties no matter the cost. My husband died for this truth. I can risk prison. What about backup? Jack asked. If you present everything at the assembly, the conspirators will try to shut down the broadcast or corrupt the records. We need insurance. Multiple copies sent to different places at the same time. Lyra tilted her head, considering. That could work. But we would need help. Someone with technical skills to set up remote broadcasts. Jack thought for a moment. I know someone. Kate Barnes. She's a ship pilot, used to run supplies through blockades during the Outer Rim conflicts. She's not exactly legal, but she's good with systems. Can she be trusted? I think so. She hates the council. They tried to shut down independent pilots 5 years ago. Kate had to fight in court to keep her license. Lyra stood again. Then we need to find her. The next Grand Assembly is in 6 weeks. That gives us time to prepare, but not much. Jack nodded. There's something else. The files mention specific locations where the conspirators meet. Black market stations, private facilities. We should check those places, gather more evidence if we can. That would be dangerous. If they discovered us investigating, they would kill us immediately. Probably. But sitting here isn't safe either. Once the conspirators realize your husband gave you the evidence, they'll come looking. We need to stay moving, stay ahead of them. Lyra's patterns shifted to a deep purple, the color of respect. You are braver than I expected, Jack Murphy. I'm not brave, I'm just angry. Thousands of people died, including your husband. Someone needs to answer for that. Over the next hour, they made plans. Jack would resign from the diplomatic service. Staying connected to the embassy would only make him easier to track. Lyra would check out of the hotel and disappear from the station before anyone noticed. They would meet at a neutral location, a trading post called Crossroads Nexus, known for not asking questions. What about your family? Jack asked. Won't they worry if you vanish? Lyra's patterns dimmed with sadness. My husband was my family. My birth family died years ago in a border dispute. I have no one who will miss me. I'm sorry. Don't be. It makes this easier. No one to use as leverage against me. Jack stood to leave. I'll book passage on a commercial transport tomorrow. It will take me about a week to reach Crossroads Nexus. I will be there, Lyra said. She walked him to the door. Before it opened, she placed one of her hands on his shoulder. Thank you, Jack, for not walking away, for caring about justice even though you don't have to. Your husband saved millions of human lives during the breach crisis. This is the least I can do, Lyra smiled, a gesture that looked almost human. He would have liked. Crossroads Nexus was not like any station Jack had ever seen. It floated in neutral space, far from any government control. The station was built from the remains of 3 old mining platforms welded together over decades. Tubes and corridors connected sections at odd angles. Some parts had gravity, others did not. The whole thing looked like it might fall apart at any moment, but it had been there for 50 years. Jack's transport docked at the outer ring. The moment he stepped off the ship, he knew he was in a different world. The air smelled of oil and spices and something sour. The walls were covered in graffiti from a dozen species. Music blared from open doorways. Beings of every shape and size moved through the corridors, talking in languages Jack's translator struggled to keep up with. This was a place where deals were made away from official eyes, where people came when they did not want questions asked. It was perfect for what Jack needed. He made his way deeper into the station, following directions from a map he had downloaded. The cantina called the last stop was supposed to be on the 3rd level near the old mining core. Jack passed shops selling everything from weapons to spices to data chips that were probably stolen. No one bothered him. Humans were common enough here that he did not stand out. The last stop was exactly what Jack expected. Dark, loud, and full of suspicious characters. Tables were scattered around a central bar. A stage in the corner had a musician playing something with too many strings. The bartender was a massive creature with 6 arms and gray skin. Jack scanned the room. No sign of Lyra yet. He had arrived a day early, wanting to scout the location first. He found an empty table in the back corner where he could watch the entrance and sat down. A server approached. She was human, probably in her 40s, with short hair and tired eyes. "What'll it be?" "Water and whatever food won't kill me," she smirked. "That narrows it down. I'll bring you the stew. It's mostly safe." Jack waited. The stew arrived and was actually not bad, though he could not identify half the ingredients. He ate slowly, watching the crowd. Most people kept to themselves. A few argued loudly at the bar. In the far corner, a card game was happening with stakes that looked serious. On his 2nd day at Crossroads Nexus, Jack started looking for Kate Barnes. He had sent her a message before leaving Harmony Prime, using an old contact code from when they had met at a diplomatic function. Kate had flown supplies for the embassy once, and Jack had helped smooth over some paperwork problems. She owed him a small favor. Her response had been brief. Crossroads. Docking Bay 12. Ask for cargo ship Wanderer. Jack found Docking Bay 12 after getting lost twice. The Wanderer was a medium-sized cargo ship that had seen better days. Patches covered the hull where repairs had been made. The engines looked like they came from 3 different ships, but something about the vessel suggested it was tougher than it appeared. Jack climbed the boarding ramp and knocked on the hull. "Kate Barnes?" "It's Jack Murphy," a voice called from inside. "Doors open." "Come on up." The interior of the ship was cramped but clean. Every surface was covered with equipment and storage containers. Jack followed the corridor to the cockpit, where Kate sat in the pilot's seat, working on a control panel. Kate Barnes was in her late 30s, with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and oil stains on her hands. She wore practical work clothes and had a tool belt around her waist. She glanced at Jack and nodded. "Murphy, been a while. You look different." "Less diplomatic. I quit. Smart man. So what's this favor you need?" "Your message was pretty vague." Jack closed the cockpit door behind him. "I need your help with something dangerous and probably illegal. It involves exposing corruption at the highest levels of the Galactic Council." Kate put down her tools and turned to face him fully. "That's a hell of an opening." "Keep talking." Jack told her everything. The conspiracy. The breach crisis. Commander Velcora's death. The evidence. Lyra's plan to speak at the Grand Assembly. He left nothing out. When he finished, Kate was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed. "You're either the bravest guy I've ever met or the dumbest. Maybe both. Will you help?" Kate stood and walked to a locker. She pulled out a bottle and 2 glasses. She poured drinks and handed one to Jack. 3 years ago, the council tried to shut down independent pilots like me. Said we were too unregulated, too dangerous. They wanted everyone flying for big corporations that they could control. I fought them in court for 8 months. Nearly bankrupted me. She took a drink. The only reason I won is because a Xanthari judge named Velcora ruled in my favor. He said independent operators were essential to a free economy. Saved my life, basically. Jack felt something click into place. "You knew him?" "Met him once at the hearing. He seemed like a good man, honest, which is rare for someone that high up." Kate set down her glass. "If someone killed him to hide the truth, then yeah, I'll help." "What do you need?" "Technical support. When Lyra speaks at the Grand Assembly, we need to make sure the broadcast reaches everywhere. Backup feeds, redundant systems, the works. If the conspirators try to shut down the official stream, we need alternatives ready." Kate nodded slowly. "I can do that. I know some people who run pirate broadcast networks. They love sticking it to the council. Give them good content and they'll spread it across half the galaxy. There's more. We need to gather additional evidence before the assembly. The files mention locations where the conspirators meet. Black market facilities, private stations. We need to visit them. That's the dangerous part. Very dangerous. If we're caught, they'll kill us." Kate grinned. "Well, good thing I'm good at not getting caught." "When do we start?" The door chime sounded. Both Jack and Kate tensed. Kate pulled a small weapon from her belt. You expecting someone? Maybe. Kate checked a screen showing the camera outside the ship. Her expression relaxed slightly. There's a Xanthari woman out there. Tall purple skin, 4 arms. Friend of yours? That's Lyra. Kate opened the door remotely. A minute later, Lyra entered the cockpit. She had changed out of her morning silver and now wore practical traveling clothes, dark pants and a jacket with 4 sleeves. Her bioluminescent patterns were barely visible under the clothing. Jack Murphy, Lyra said. You arrived early. Wanted to scout the area first. Jack gestured to Kate. This is Kate Barnes. She's agreed to help us. Lyra studied Kate with her black eyes. You are the pilot who knew my husband. Knew of him more like. But he did me a solid once. Figure I owe him. Lyra's patterns brightened briefly. Thank you. We will need all the help we can find. Over the next hour, they made plans. Kate pulled up star charts and marked the locations from Velcora's files. There were 5 places worth investigating. 2 black market stations, a private facility on an asteroid, a supposedly abandoned mining operation, and a luxury resort that served as a cover for illegal meetings. We can't hit all 5, Kate said. That would take months, and the assembly is in 4 weeks now. We need to pick the best targets. The luxury resort, Lyra suggested. My husband's notes said the conspirators meet there every month. The next meeting is in 12 days. Jack looked at the location. It's in council space. Heavily monitored, which is why they use it. No one suspects a resort full of rich tourists. Kate nodded. I can get us there. The Wanderer is registered as a cargo ship, but I've made some modifications. We can pass as a delivery vessel. What about security? Jack asked. The resort has good systems, but they're designed to keep out thieves and troublemakers, not people with serious skills. I can bypass most of it. Lyra pulled out a small device from her jacket. I also have access codes. My husband copied them from a conspirator's personal system. They may still work. May? Kate raised an eyebrow. My husband died 6 weeks ago. It is possible the codes have been changed, but it is worth trying. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Kate made sure her ship was ready for the journey. Jack reviewed the evidence files, looking for specific information about the resort and who would be there. Lyra meditated in silence, a Xanthari practice for calming the mind before danger. That evening, they gathered in the ship's small common area for a meal. Kate had cooked something that actually tasted good, a stew with vegetables and protein from 6 worlds. Can I ask you something? Kate said to Lyra. Why risk all this? Your people have that whole morning silence thing. You could just disappear, live quietly somewhere. Lyra was quiet for a moment. My husband believed the galaxy could be better. That different species could work together based on honesty and justice, not power and fear. He died trying to prove that. If I do nothing, his death means nothing. The conspirators win. The galaxy stays corrupt. And you think 2 humans and 1 Xanthari can change that? I think 3 people who refuse to give up can do more than 1,000 who have already surrendered. Kate smiled. I like you. You've got spirit. They launched from Crossroads Nexus the next morning. The Wanderer was faster than Jack expected, and Kate knew routes through space that avoided major checkpoints. She explained that years of running supplies had taught her every shortcut and hiding spot in this sector. The journey to the resort took 8 days. They used the time to prepare. Kate taught Jack basic security bypassing. Lyra shared everything she knew about the conspirators' habits and protocols. Jack organized the evidence into a presentation that could be delivered in under 10 minutes. Short enough, the Grand Assembly Hall was even more impressive than Jack had imagined. It floated in orbit around the Council homeworld, a massive structure shaped like a flower with 47 petals, 1 for each member species. The central chamber was made of transparent crystal, allowing everyone inside to see the stars above and the planet below. Kate docked the Wanderer at a public berth 3 hours before the assembly session was scheduled to begin. Security was tight but not impossible. Ships were scanned for weapons and explosives, but data devices were allowed. Jack carried his encrypted data stick hidden in his boot. Lyra wore her ceremonial truth speaker armor, a Xanthari tradition that granted her special status. You sure about this? Kate asked as they prepared to disembark. She would stay with the ship, managing the backup broadcast systems remotely. No, Jack admitted, but we're doing it anyway. Lyra placed one of her hands on Jack's shoulder. My husband chose well. Whatever happens today, you have honored his memory. They left the ship and made their way through the station corridors toward the assembly hall. Hundreds of beings moved around them, all heading to the same destination. Some were delegates. Others were staff or media or simply curious observers. The assembly was open to the public, a tradition designed to show transparency. At the entrance, security guards checked their credentials. Jack had his old diplomatic identification, which was technically still valid for another week. Lyra showed her authorization as the widow of Commander Velcora, invoking the right of the fallen. The guard, a being with scales and too many eyes, studied the documents carefully. The widow wishes to address the assembly, the guard asked. That is my right, Lyra said calmly. It is highly unusual, but legal. The guard consulted with someone through a communication device. After a tense minute, he nodded. You may enter. You will be given time to speak during the open testimony period. Jack let out a breath he did not know he was holding. They were in. The assembly chamber was breathtaking. 47 sections rose in tiers around a central platform. Each section held the representatives from one species, dozens of them in some cases. Thousands of beings filled the space, talking and moving and preparing for the session. Above, through the transparent ceiling, stars shone like diamonds. Jack and Lyra found seats in the visitor section. From here they could see everything. The central platform where speakers would stand. The main screen that would display information for all to see. The broadcast cameras that would send this session to every corner of the galaxy. How long until you speak? Jack whispered. Open testimony begins 1 hour into the session. Anyone with standing may request time. I will be added to the list. Jack pulled out a small communication device. He sent a quick message to Kate. We're in position. Standing by. Kate's reply came seconds later. All systems ready. I've got backup feeds running to 6 different networks. The moment you start, the whole galaxy will be watching. The session began with ceremonial music. Then the council speaker, an elderly being from a species Jack did not recognize, called the assembly to order. The first hour was filled with standard business. Trade agreements, border disputes, research funding. Jack barely paid attention. His heart was racing too fast. Finally, the speaker announced the open testimony period. Any being with standing may approach the platform and address the assembly. Lyra stood. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed with steady determination. She walked down the steps toward the central platform, and Jack followed. As they descended, Jack noticed movement in one of the upper sections. A Saurian delegate was speaking urgently into a communication device, his expression alarmed. They knew. The conspirators had spotted Lyra and realized what was about to happen. Lyra reached the platform and stood in the center. Lights focused on her, making her ceremonial armor shine. The cameras turned to capture her image. Jack stayed at the edge of the platform, ready to help if needed. The speaker looked at Lyra with curiosity. State your name and purpose. I am Lyra, widow of Commander Velcora of the Zenthari fleet. I invoke the right of the fallen to honor my husband's memory. A murmur went through the crowd. The right was ancient and respected. Even species that did not like each other honored it. You may speak, the speaker said. Lyra took a deep breath. My husband was killed 6 weeks ago. His death was reported as an accident. Equipment failure during a training mission. But this was a lie. Commander Velcora was murdered because he discovered a conspiracy within this very council. The murmur turned into shocked gasps. Several delegates stood, shouting objections. The Saurian delegate Krex pointed at Lyra. This is outrageous. Remove her from the platform. The speaker raised a hand for silence. The right of the fallen protects her speech. She may continue. Lyra's voice grew stronger. 3 years ago, the breach crisis nearly destroyed humanity's colony program. Over 5,000 humans died when their ships were attacked. We were told it was random raiders, but my husband discovered the truth. The attacks were planned, orchestrated by members of this council who feared humanity's rapid advancement. Now the entire chamber was in chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. Security guards moved toward the platform. Jack pulled out his data stick and handed it to Lyra. She inserted it into the platform's data port. I have evidence, Lyra said, and her voice boomed through the speakers. Communications between conspirators. Financial records showing payments to mercenary groups. Testimony from individuals who helped carry out the attacks. All of it is here. The main screen lit up, showing documents from Velcora's files, emails between council members discussing the colony ship sabotage, bank transfers to known criminal organizations, video of Pete Collins, the human engineer, confessing his role in installing faulty systems. The chamber went silent. Everyone stared at the screen, reading the evidence that was now part of the permanent record. Krex tried to run. Security guards grabbed him before he reached the exit. Other delegates started pointing at conspirators in their sections. The conspiracy was unraveling in real time, broadcast across every channel in the galaxy. The speaker stood, his face pale. "This is unprecedented. These are serious accusations." "They are facts," Lyra said. "My husband died trying to expose this corruption. I will not let his death be meaningless." Jack watched the screens around the chamber. Kate had done her job perfectly. The backup feeds were active, sending the broadcast to networks the council could not control. Even if someone tried to shut down the official stream, millions of beings were already watching through other channels. A delegate from the human section stood up. It was Ambassador Cole Harrison, Earth's senior representative. "These allegations must be investigated immediately. If what the widow says is true, this council has blood on its hands." Other delegates began calling for investigations, for arrests, for justice. The conspiracy had controlled the council through secrecy and intimidation. But now that the truth was public, their power was broken. Security began moving through the chamber, detaining delegates whose names appeared in the evidence. Krex shouted denials even as he was led away in restraints. Others tried to claim they were tricked or blackmailed. No one was listening. Lyra stepped away from the platform, exhausted. Her bioluminescent patterns had dimmed to almost nothing. Jack caught her arm as she stumbled. "You did it," he said quietly. "Your husband would be proud." "We did it," Lyra corrected. "You chose to help when you could have walked away. That took courage." They made their way back up to the visitor section. Around them, the assembly continued to dissolve into organized chaos. The speaker was calling for order, but it was a lost cause. Too many years of corruption were being exposed all at once. Jack's communication device buzzed. Kate's message read, "You two are famous. Every news network in the galaxy is running this story. Good work." Over the next few hours, the situation stabilized. The council announced a special investigation committee, made up of representatives from species not involved in the conspiracy. Arrests were made. Bank accounts were frozen. The wheels of justice, so long blocked, began to turn. Jack and Lyra were brought to a private room where they could rest. Ambassador Harrison came to see them personally. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the craziest," Harrison said. "Maybe both." "We did what was necessary," Lyra said. Harrison nodded. "Earth owes you both a debt. Those colony ships held our future. Over 5,000 people died, and we thought it was just bad luck. Now we know someone murdered them deliberately. Will there be justice?" Jack asked. "Yes, the evidence you provided is solid. The conspirators will face trial, and it will be public. No backroom deals this time." Harrison looked at Jack. "I heard you resigned from the diplomatic service." "I did. Would you consider coming back? We could use someone with your integrity, someone who isn't afraid to stand up to power." Jack glanced at Lyra. She gave a small nod, encouraging him to decide for himself. "I'll think about it," Jack said. "But first, I need to make sure this investigation actually happens. That the truth doesn't get buried again. Fair enough. You've earned the right to see this through." In the weeks that followed, Jack and Lyra became unlikely celebrities. Their faces were shown on news broadcasts across the galaxy. Some called them heroes. Others called them troublemakers who had disrupted